All professionals and even some family members should be able to make a reasonable mental capacity assessment of a patient's ability to form their own decisions. This is important in order to decide whether the patient themselves can make decisions or a family member or guardian has to make the decisions for them. So what's in this video? We're going to discuss the difference between normal aging and Alzheimer's and how one's executive function is important in this respect. What is capacity and how do you assess it? How to maximize a patient's ability to make decisions or give consent. What reasons other than Alzheimer's are there for people lacking mental capacity? Retrospective capacity testing. Many elderly people have poor memories. One shouldn't confuse a poor memory with an inability to make one's own decisions. In fact, decision-making ability is largely dependent on your executive functions, which are not entirely reliant on your memory. Executive function can be described as a set of cognitive skills set around planning, initiation, reasoning, organization, all coming together to give one an ability to make one's own decisions. This may seem a bit of a mouthful, and sometimes I like to think that the terms foresight and imagination are a little bit better in describing these functions. After all, when one makes a decision, one has to imagine what's going on and how it would affect one in the future. When one's assessing someone's capacity, it's important to understand memory testing really has no part to play in this process. As everybody knows, many elderly people have quite poor memories, but can in fact make quite reasonable decisions for themselves. So many mental tests were originally developed as memory and attention tests to diagnose dementia and view their progress. They are not really to be used as a screening test for someone's capacity. Neither is it about making the right decision. Many people may have different values and beliefs which you completely disagree with, and the decisions they make may not seem right to you. That doesn't mean that they lack capacity to make those decisions and retain the rights to do so. Some people may have particular vendettas against family members, hate certain individuals, and have bizarre health beliefs. This really is irrelevant to the decision about whether or not they can make their own decisions. A simple definition of mental capacity is, does an individual understand what the decision is about and the consequences of their decision at the time that it is made? In general, when you assess the capacity of a person to make a particular decision, you're considering whether a person can do the following. Can they understand the facts involved in the decision? Does extra information need to be given to them in order for them to do this? Do they know the main choices that exist, the benefits, risks, and alternatives? Can they weigh up the consequences of their choices? It's important for them to be able to weigh the pros and cons in order to arrive at a decision. They don't need to remember the decision for hours or days later, but they do need to be able to remember the decision long enough for the discussion to occur. They need to understand how the consequences of the decision affect themselves and others. They need to be able to communicate the decision to others. Can the patient give you a reason for their decision? What is the rationale? It isn't necessary to give a reason to prove capacity, but it usually helps clarify their understanding of the issues. When questioning somebody about their mental capacity, it's always important to ask open-ended questions rather than questions which require only a yes or no answer. Don't ask leading questions. Leading questions suggest or guide the person to a particular answer. The aim of questioning is to draw the person into a discussion about the decision, the options, and the consequences. That will give you an opportunity to assess the person's ability to understand and weigh up information, choices, and consequences. It is easy to ask a question like, what does a patient do when they receive an electricity bill? What happens if they don't pay that bill? If they were needed to appoint a power of attorney, ask them what a power of attorney might be. You may need to give some explanation, and they could feed back to you what their understanding was about that was. Ask them who they might involve in this issue and who might be a power of attorney for them, and what might be the important issues that they might want to discuss covered by this. If they were talking about making a will, ask them what a will is about. Everyone ought to know what that is, what sort of property and assets they might have would be included in the will, who might the beneficiaries be, how might their decisions affect various different parties or members of family. If there is a third party in the discussions, such as a family member, carer, or solicitor, it's important to be sure that they are only there to provide support and guidance, and not to put undue pressure on an individual to make a particular decision. The decision should be made freely and without coercion. Often patients with Alzheimer's who do not have a capacity to make decisions, when asked about particular questions, will defer the question. So they may say, I'll have to think about that and tell you later. Or they may say, and turn to the relative and say, I'll have to ask my daughter and see what she thinks. When you try and explore the issue slightly further to elucidate what that means, it soon becomes evident that they really don't understand the question at all. There are several rules in mental capacity assessments. Always presume a person has capacity until proven otherwise. Capacity is decision specific. Some decisions are easier for patients who have borderline capacity than others. Don't assume a person lacks capacity based on appearances or behavior. Assess a person's decision-making ability, not the decision they make. Respecting a person's right to privacy when you're assessing their capacity. Remember, do not disclose changes to wills, etc., to third parties without a patient's consent. If a patient is in a nursing home, it might be worth asking either nursing staff or even cleaners their opinion of someone's capacity and why they might hold those opinions. It is important to record the decisions that are made in a patient's notes and your assessment of their mental capacity. Many years later, you may be asked to justify this, and you need some sort of written record to refer to. It's important to record patients' understanding of the issues and their understanding of the consequences of their decisions. You should try and maximize a patient's ability to make decisions. Make sure you choose the best time of day for an individual. Ask whether it's a bad day for them, or check this with a relative or nursing staff. Make sure you have adequate time. Repeat any information that's as necessary. Use any appropriate communication aids. In some rare occasions, you may need to use interpreters or sign language. A close family member may be needed for support. You need to attend to the fact that some people are maybe extremely deaf, have difficulty with speech, have slowness of mentation, have language difficulties, or may be completely blind. If there are disagreements about someone's capacity between yourself and family members or a solicitor, it's sometimes useful to see the patient with a family member to try and demonstrate to them the patient's capacity to understand or not understand issues. The disagreement is usually about their memory, which only has a small part to play in their capacity. In unusual circumstances, you may have to refer to an expert in capacity issues, such as a neuropsychologist or a specialist in the care of the elderly. And failing this, some people require assessments by guardianship tribunals. There may be other reasons for lack of mental capacity apart from Alzheimer's disease or severe stroke. One of them is severe mental illness and delusions, which affect their capacity. Others are short-term illnesses causing acute confusional states, the effects of drugs or alcohol or head injury. Some of these problems may be temporary, and if decisions can be delayed until someone's recovery, certainly it's important that that's done. So what is retrospective capacity testing? Occasionally doctors are asked to give an assessment of someone's capacity perhaps several years ago. An individual, say Mrs. X, is now dead, or she is in a nursing home and far too demented to give an account of what happened perhaps 3 or 4 years ago. Usually there is some dispute about a will or some financial assets to which one now needs to attend. A family member, a lawyer, or a court may approach you to see if you can verify a patient's previous capacity from your either memory or from your consultation notes. It is unlikely that you would have made a capacity assessment at that time, but that doesn't mean that you can't make a valid assessment of their previous capacity. You are, after all, not being asked to make a definitive assessment of their capacity, but only a probability of their capacity. The definitive assessment would be made by a court. So what clues can one use to make a retrospective capacity assessment? When looking through the notes and from your memory, did the patient present with illnesses or follow up on their own, or did they attend with somebody else? Would it seem reasonable to assert that they were taking care of their own healthcare needs and acting on advice? Was there any evidence of persistent non-compliance, forgotten appointments, etc.? Did they seem to be taking their medication, suggesting they understood the importance of this and serious consequences of defaulting? If they attended with a family member or carer, was this because they needed them just for support, help with communication, help with memorizing instructions, or really was it because they were needed to make decisions on their behalf? Were any tests done with respect to dementia? If so, were the results quite good or so abominably poor, which might help to tip the probability in favor or against capacity? Mini mental scores of 22 out of 30 might suggest probability of capacity, whereas those of 8 out of 30 suggest not. This series has been about taking a modern approach to advanced care planning, to focus on the rights and opinions of individuals and their families to make their own decisions, and also to reflect on how modern treatments can affect our lives dramatically, not just those based in hospitals such as CPR and life support, but all those preventative measures such as blood pressure treatments and cholesterol tablets that so really prolong our lives. The Advanced Care Directive forms, the 5-step information leaflet for families, and palliative care directive forms are all available on the following websites.